We've all seen it happen. Two people meet, one with a heart wide open, the other with walls made of steel. One who feels deeply, gives endlessly, reads between the lines, and the other who avoids, pulls away, shuts down when it matters most. In that dynamic, the empath often bends. They try to understand. They try to communicate. They try to heal what isn't theirs to fix. But what happens when the super empath, the one who loves deeply but also values their peace, goes silent? The avoidant wasn't ready for that. They were used to the empath chasing, texting again, apologizing for feeling too much. But the silence? That's different. That's not passive. That's power. The super empath doesn't go silent out of spite. They go silent because they finally see the truth, that love cannot thrive in emotional starvation, that connection doesn't mean carrying the whole relationship on your back. Silence is not weakness. It's the turning point. It's the moment the empath chooses themselves. And for the avoidant, that silence is deafening, because suddenly the game has ended. The mirror is up. There's no one left to project on. No one left to blame. Just the echo of all the words they never said. And the one person who would have listened is now gone. This isn't about revenge. This is about realization. So if you've ever been the super empath, know this. Your silence doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you cared enough to finally walk away from what was slowly draining you. And if you've ever been the avoidant, understand, silence isn't abandonment. It's the cost of ignoring someone who was once willing to love you loudly. The super empath gives deeply, but not endlessly. This kind of person feels everything, not just their own emotions, but the emotions of those around them. They're tuned in, they're present. They notice the small shifts in tone, the hesitations in text messages, the energy in a room. And when they love, they don't do it halfway. They love with intensity, with honesty, and with a belief that love can heal. They listen without judgment, give without expecting anything in return, and often find themselves carrying the emotional weight for two people. It's not because they're naive, it's because they genuinely want to understand. They believe that if they can just love a little harder, give a little more, maybe, just maybe, the other person will feel safe enough to open up. But there comes a point, even for the most giving soul, when the emotional scale becomes too unbalanced to ignore. The super empath may be patient, but they are not blind. Over time, they begin to see the patterns, the disappearing acts, the emotional deflection, the way vulnerability is met with silence or withdrawal. They notice how conversations always stop just short of intimacy, how their efforts to connect are met with distance or avoidance. At first, they may blame themselves. They think maybe I'm too much, or maybe I need to be more understanding. And so they give even more. They suppress their needs. They shrink themselves to maintain peace. But emotional generosity without reciprocity becomes emotional starvation. Slowly, the super empath begins to realize that love doesn't mean sacrificing their own mental and emotional health. They realize that connection isn't supposed to feel like chasing. It's not meant to feel like guessing or negotiating your worth. What they offered so freely, their presence, their attention, their compassion, was not something to be exploited. It was sacred, and it was never meant to carry the full weight of someone else's healing. So the giving stops, not because the love is gone, but because self-respect has taken its rightful place. The empath starts choosing themselves. They stop over-explaining. They stop checking in when their own cup is empty. They begin to understand that true love must be mutual. It must be safe. It must be emotionally available. And they finally accept that no amount of effort can make someone ready to receive what they are not prepared to hold. This shift is not dramatic. It doesn't come with a big announcement. It's quiet, subtle. It happens when the empath doesn't chase after the unanswered message, when they no longer fill in the silence with justification, when they no longer beg for the bare minimum. They begin to see that constantly giving in a one-sided relationship is not love, it's self-abandonment. And they've already done enough of that in the name of trying to be understanding. So while the super empath may have given deeply, their silence now speaks volumes. Not because they've stopped caring, but because they've started caring for themselves. Silence is not weakness, it's clarity. For the super empath, who is used to expressing, comforting, and holding emotional space, silence doesn't come easily. It's not their first instinct. Their natural response to distance is communication. When something feels off, they want to talk about it. When energy shifts, they want to understand it. Their silence is not born from spite or manipulation. It's born from a moment of deep internal realization that words are no longer bridging the gap. It's the turning point when they recognize that more talking won't lead to more connection. It won't soften a guarded heart or pull consistency out of avoidance. The silence begins as a whisper, a pause. Then it grows louder as they watch their words go unanswered and their needs go unmet. At first, they may wrestle with it. Silence feels unnatural to someone whose love language is communication. They may feel guilty, as if by going quiet, they are abandoning someone. But slowly, the guilt fades and clarity sets in. They realize they've been filling all the empty spaces in the relationship. They've been initiating the repair, carrying both sides of the emotional dialogue and sacrificing their own voice just to keep a fragile connection alive. Their silence is not retreat. It's recognition. It's the moment they decide to stop performing emotional labor that's not being matched. Not because they want to hurt the other person, but because they are done hurting themselves. This clarity is powerful. It often arrives after long nights of second guessing, of wondering if they're too needy, too sensitive, too intense. But the silence tells them otherwise. It tells them their needs are valid, that their emotions are not too much, that their intuition was right. It tells them that a relationship where one person constantly explains their worth is not a relationship. It's a performance. The silence becomes their boundary. It becomes a space of reflection, not punishment. They're no longer trying to convince someone to stay, to open up, to see their value. They already know their value, and they know when it's being dismissed. To the outside world, or even to the avoidant partner, the empath's silence may look like detachment or coldness, but it's not. It's the final act of love turned inward. It's how the empath reclaims their voice by no longer offering it where it's not respected. The stillness becomes sacred. No more over-explaining, no more chasing closure, no more hoping that their words will be the key to someone else's emotional maturity. Silence becomes the space where the empath returns to themselves, where they find peace that doesn't depend on another person's ability to meet them halfway. In that space of quiet, they see everything clearly. The patterns, the excuses, the self-betrayals disguised as patience. And they realize they're not broken. They were just speaking a language the other person wasn't ready to understand. So they stop speaking, not because they have nothing left to say, but because they finally understand that they're the only one listening. Avoidants often underestimate the power of detachment. They assume the dynamic will always stay the same, that the empath will keep reaching out, keep showing up, keep making excuses for their emotional unavailability. In their world, distance is control. Pulling back is safety. They believe that the person who cares more is the one who will bend, and that as long as they hold their cards close, they won't lose. But what avoidants frequently fail to see is that the super empath's patience is not infinite. While they may initially tolerate inconsistency and mixed signals in the name of compassion, there comes a moment when something shifts. That shift is detachment. And once it happens, everything changes. The avoidant is used to emotional space working in their favor. It gives them breathing room. It keeps intimacy at a safe distance. They know how to send short replies, take days to respond, shut down mid-conversation and keep their feelings buried beneath layers of avoidance. They expect that the empath will bridge the gap, fill the silence, and continue doing the emotional heavy lifting. And for a while, that's exactly what happens. The empath, driven by the desire to understand and connect, gives chance after chance, trying to decode silence and shrink themselves to fit what the avoidant can handle. But detachment doesn't come with a warning. It doesn't look like a fight or an outburst. It's calm, quiet, and unshakable. The empath begins to respond differently, or not at all. They no longer reach for the emotional door that's always half closed. They stop asking how someone feels when the answer is always hidden behind a wall. They no longer try to fix what they didn't break. This is the moment the avoidant wasn't prepared for, because their power was never in their silence. It was in the expectation that someone else would keep trying to break it. The power dynamic flips. The one who once feared abandonment now becomes the one who lets go. Not out of resentment, but out of clarity. The avoidant, used to being chased, suddenly finds that no one is running after them anymore. The space they once relied on to protect themselves now feels empty. The silence they used to control the pace of the relationship now echoes back to them, and they begin to realize that emotional distance may have kept them from feeling vulnerable, but it also kept them from being truly seen. Detachment is not coldness. It's the result of emotional exhaustion. It's not about giving up quickly. It's about finally accepting reality. The empath doesn't detach out of indifference. They detach because they've come to understand that connection should not be one-sided. The avoidant, in protecting themselves from perceived threats of closeness, ultimately pushes away the one person who tried the hardest to meet them where they were. They didn't expect the empath to walk away, especially not quietly. But when detachment replaces devotion, the game they relied on to feel safe loses all its power. The end isn't loud, it's grounded. When the super empath finally reaches their breaking point, it doesn't look like chaos. There's no dramatic exit, no shouting match, no ultimatums screamed across the phone. That's not how they operate. For someone who has spent so much time feeling everything, navigating others' emotions, and holding space for even the most uncomfortable truths, their final move is often calm, it's deliberate, it's quiet. But don't mistake that quiet for indifference. It's the result of deep processing, long nights of reflection, and an inner shift that's been building for a while. People often expect the end of a relationship, especially one filled with emotional imbalance, to be explosive. They think there will be tears, confrontation, accusations. But when the empath has already exhausted every emotional avenue, when they've communicated, compromised, questioned, and contorted themselves to keep a connection alive, there's nothing left to fight about. There's only truth. And that truth is simple. They can't do it anymore. The quiet ending is not an accident, it's a choice. The super empath has learned that their energy is sacred, and they're no longer willing to spend it on someone who remains emotionally unavailable, no matter how much love they once felt. Their silence isn't a ploy for attention, it's a boundary. It's the product of countless moments where they voiced their needs and were met with indifference, where they showed up and the other person retreated, where they tried to hold the relationship together and realized they were the only one with their hands on the thread. Grounded endings come from acceptance. It's not that the empath stopped caring, it's that they finally saw the situation clearly, not through hope, not through potential, but through reality. And that clarity gave them peace. It showed them that walking away didn't mean failure, it meant growth. It meant recognizing that love, in its truest form, should never feel like a constant test of worth. It shouldn't feel like emotional starvation or like begging for the bare minimum. For the avoidant partner, the stillness of the empath's departure can be jarring. There's no chaos to distract from the loss, no fight to inflate the ego, just the quiet disappearance of someone who used to pour their heart out daily. That stillness is what leaves an impact, not because it's meant to punish, but because it's honest. It reflects the space that always existed between them, the one the empath tried to close with compassion, but could no longer deny. This kind of ending is harder to dismiss. It can't be written off as drama or emotional instability. It's mature. It's steady. It's the empath finally choosing peace over potential, reality over fantasy, self-respect over repeated disappointment. They don't slam the door. They simply stop knocking. And in that final moment, there's a strength that speaks louder than any outburst ever could. However, the empath leaves not in a storm, but in stillness. And that, more than anything, is what leaves a lasting impression. Silence is a response, not revenge. For the super empath, going quiet is never about winning a game or punishing someone into guilt. It's not a strategy to manipulate or gain the upper hand. It's a natural, honest response to repeated disregard. When communication has been ignored, vulnerability has been met with discomfort, and love has been returned with distance, silence becomes the only thing left. It's not rooted in bitterness, it's rooted in self-preservation. It's what happens when someone has said all they can say, shown all they can show, and still been met with emotional absence. People often misunderstand silence. They see it as cold, detached, or even dramatic. But for someone who's always tried to bridge the gap, who's poured their energy into understanding and supporting someone emotionally unavailable, silence is the last resort. It's not an emotional shutdown, it's an awakening. It's the moment the empath realizes they've been holding on to someone who was never really meeting them halfway. That realization doesn't spark rage, it brings a kind of painful clarity. One that demands space, not noise. Revenge seeks to hurt, silence seeks to heal, just not in the way the other person expects. It's a form of healing that requires stepping back, turning inward, and reclaiming the emotional energy that's been consistently drained. The empath isn't trying to make the avoidant suffer. They're not sitting in silence waiting for them to come back and feel regret. They're using that space to breathe again, to reflect, to reconnect with parts of themselves they lost while trying to earn someone's love. The avoidant might view the silence as abandonment. They might believe the empath is being cold or walking away too easily. But that's a projection. What they're really feeling is the weight of emotional consequences. They're feeling what it's like when someone who once overextended finally steps back. Not to hurt them, but because they've learned that their emotional safety matters too. Silence is powerful because it's grounded in truth. It doesn't seek attention or applause. It doesn't chase. It simply allows space for what is, without forcing it into something it's not. When the empath goes silent, it's because they've stopped arguing with reality. They've stopped trying to convince someone to show up. They've stopped pleading for emotional presence, and they've accepted that their peace is more important than their potential with someone who isn't ready. This silence speaks volumes. It says, I loved you, but I love myself too. It says, I tried, but I won't keep trying alone. It reflects a love that was once unconditional, but has now evolved into self-love with boundaries. The empath doesn't slam the door or leave with resentment. They simply stop pouring energy into a cup that never held water. Silence isn't the absence of love. It's the presence of wisdom. It's what happens when the empath finally honors their intuition over their hope, their needs over their fear, and their peace over the potential of someone else. The quiet is not empty. It's full of everything they've learned about who they are and what they will never settle for again. When it's all said and done, this isn't a story about blame. It's not about pointing fingers at the avoidant or glorifying the empath. It's about awareness. It's about the quiet strength that comes when someone finally chooses their peace over their pattern. The super empath didn't go silent to be cruel. They went silent because they outgrew the noise of confusion, of inconsistency, of one-sided effort. And the avoidants, they weren't ready. Not because they're bad or broken, but because silence forces reflection, and reflection requires courage. Real connection asks both people to show up honestly, consistently, and vulnerably. When that balance isn't there, love becomes survival, and survival isn't sustainable. So if you're the one who walked away in silence, know this. Your quiet exit may have been the loudest declaration of self-worth you've ever made. And if you're the one left with the silence, ask yourself, not why they left, but what your distance truly cost you. Relationships don't end when the talking stops. They end when the listening never began. Thank you for listening. If these words found you at the right time, I hope they reminded you that silence doesn't mean the absence of love. It often means the beginning of self-respect. You deserve a connection where your presence is felt, your voice is valued, and your heart doesn't have to beg to be seen. Take care of your peace, protect your energy, and remember, walking away quietly is still walking away with power. Until next time, be well, and thank you.